I remember the incident that happened 6 months ago. It brought my daughter and me closer than we've been ever since she turned 16. It has been a real fight every now and then between us. We never agree on even the minutest trifle. It was like she derived pleasures going against my will. Inasmuch as I make the rule, I try as much as possible to consider her, but she outrightly breaks the rule. One time she told me, she didn't ask to be born into this world by me, and I had no right to tell her what to do. It really broke my heart. I prayed and wished something would happen that would make her realize how wrong she was. It didn't happen as fast as I hoped. After she graduated from high school, it became a very serious fight. One time she left home for 2 weeks, not responding to my calls. It left me really worried. None of her friends knew her whereabouts. If they did, they were loyal enough not to let me know. I didn't know what else to do than report it to the police. She got to know about it and she called immediately, threatening never to come back until I withdrew the complaint. At least tell me your whereabouts. She refused and hung up. The next day, I went to the police and told them, even though I was feeling embarrassed. Laura didn't come home after a week. I was sick of worry. I was shocked and grateful when I got home from work and I found her sleeping one day. I asked my housekeeper, who told me she got back sour and drunk. It was later that I learned she'd gone to Malibu with a stupid boy who attended the same high school as her. Nothing breaks a mother more than having a rebellious child who hates her for the mere reason of bringing her into the world. Maybe it was the absence of a man to call dad. From the onset it has just been us, just the two of us. Her father had disappeared the moment he learned I was carrying his child, and I've had to take responsibility for her in the past 20 years. Isn't that enough to forget him and not blame me for his absence? I'd made efforts and spent oodles of money to get her into college, yet she refused. In her words, I don't need college to live. What didn't I do to secure her future? She chose her path and I had to respect that, hoping that someday she'll come to her senses. It breaks me that it took a long time before it came to that. I was dumbfounded when she got home one evening with a young man she called Jimmy. A remarkably built young man on blonde, with biceps threatening to rip out of the fabric of his sleeves. Broad shoulders that carry the weight of his heartlessness and greed. His mere presence and the atmosphere were foggy. I tried so hard to keep cool, waiting to hear about this man from my daughter. She merely said he was her fiancé. That she didn't want any drama from me. I was disappointed. I felt fury erupting from my stomach. I quickly gulped a glass of water. I felt a little calm. But with much difficulty, I nauseated my disgust, however choking it was. All I said was okay. And I asked why he was here. She asked if she had no right to bring whoever she pleases into the house. I was mad at such disrespect. I was further stunned when she said, he was going to live with us in the estate and that I should give him a job in my company. If she were not my daughter, and we were not citizens of the United States of America, I'd have gone physical with her and given her a slap for once. One she will always refer back to, just like I've seen in a movie from somewhere in another place. The slap left traces of lines on the victim's cheek, and that was really deserving of my daughter. I maintained a surprisingly calm demeanor as I scooped some grains of rice, opened my mouth wide, welcomed it into my mouth, chewed, and felt it travel right through my esophagus down to my belly. Absent-mindedly I drank up my glass of wine. All the while, the rascal-looking man was not ashamed with the way he gluttonously emptied his plate of meal. He ate like an uncultured swine, and I felt embarrassed in his stead. I heard myself ask, "You got a college degree?" He was nodding in affirmation when my daughter said that those questions were unnecessary since he was her husband-to-be and I was in the position to offer him a job. I was compelled to give him the job just to make Laura happy. She enjoys doing the opposite of what it is I ever wanted for her. Ever since she clocked 16, I'd had more difficulty than I did my entire life trying to raise her properly. She refused to listen. Once I warned her never to get into a car driven by a teenager. The next day, she got home in a car driven by a boy. I was speechless because it was just a day before that I told her. After dinner, I went upstairs into my room. As I peered from my window I saw them moving into the apartment with Jimmy's belongings. I was ashamed of how shameful it was to have a supposed son-in-law moving into the same apartment. I was lost in thought when my phone rang. It was Jonathan on the other end. He called to know how I was. I told him I wasn't okay, and he knew at once the reason. All those while he had been the support I needed mentally to get through the emotional turmoil my daughter had thrown me into ever since she turned 16. Jonathan had been not just a colleague but a friend. We got into a romantic relationship officially around the time Laura left home for Malibu. He was there to soothe and encourage me, and somehow we had sex. Though it was awkward afterward, he eventually told me how he felt about me, and ever since then, he was always there and was the strong fulcrum that I needed to pull through. After I told him about Jimmy, he said it was okay. How hard would it be, since we had enough houses in the estate? Besides, I'm in the position of giving him a job to make him a better man. Perhaps he was the right man for my daughter and all of that. So I loosened up a bit. Afterward, we discussed our relationship and how well things were going between us. We expressed our love for each other once again, as we often do. 2 months later, while in my office, I heard a knock on the door and it was my receptionist. I was taken aback as to when she had ever come to my office during work hours. She doesn't report directly to me and I was compelled to understand why she would be in my office. I gestured for her to sit and she did. When I asked what was wrong, she complained about Jimmy Beacon, the assistant director of the tech unit, making sexual advances toward her. And just like expected, she had come to make an official complaint. I was at a loss for words. I finally told her I would investigate the matter accordingly. Thankfully, she left my office. I didn't know what to do, but I was grateful I never disclosed the fact he was my son-in-law to be. It would have been a very big embarrassment. This complaint from my receptionist is in addition to dozens of others from my other workers. I was angry about the whole thing. Why would a nobody come to live in my house? I give him a job and he decides to sexually harass my workers under my nose. That was the height of disrespect, and I decided I would talk it over with my daughter. This gold digger she brought was trying to destroy reputations I labored to build, and I wasn't going to allow it. I was still fuming when Jonathan walked into my office in his habitual manner of not knocking. He locked the door behind him, dropped the files he was having as he observed my mood. He asked what was wrong and I told him all that I knew, and he was disappointed. But he decided he would talk to Jimmy while I do the same with my daughter. Later he told me why he was there. It was strictly business. He was made an offer by one of the renowned fashion companies called Devil Wears in New York, and he would be leaving the city soon. I wasn't surprised. I had always known he had an interest in fashion. Besides, he created styles in his sketchbook that never left his person, styles which he would send across to so many fashion houses hoping to land a deal, and finally here it was. It was a mature thing to rejoice with him and let him go. Jonathan had been with me from the beginning. Initially, it was hard for him to find his ground, but he was smart and intelligent, and he was where he was as a result of hard work and effort. Most times I wondered if it was his doggedness or good looks that got me so attracted to him. Though I was sad, I was happy for his success. He would finally live his dreams. However, I was worried as to how we would manage the relationship. As if he was thinking about the same thing, he promised he would be back after a while, which he wasn't certain. I knew better than banking on his promises. I resolved it was better I let him go and pursue his dreams. Besides, nothing lasts forever. We had enjoyed the relationship while it lasted, and I was ready to make whatever sacrifices were needed. He was hurt by this because he never envisaged that our relationship wouldn't last. He calmly left my office and I didn't call him back. 42 years of my life was enough to teach me not to hold anyone back, but to let things go, and simply enjoy it while it lasts. Silently I prayed Laura would come to a realization of what I honestly wasn't sure of. But I knew if she came to the realization, a lot would change in her way. I got home that evening, and Jimmy was the first person I met. Laura, as I reckoned, was in the bathroom. I told him about the complaints I'd received from some of my staff, which he denied outrightly. However, I warned him to desist from such, else my daughter would learn about it and the board would take immediate action. He didn't look bothered by what I told him. Instead, he went ahead to tell me about his displeasure at having Jonathan speak to him, that he had no right to meddle in his affairs. The same way I retorted that he had no right to be standing where he was under my roof. Same way he had no right to be enjoying the benefits of living in my house for free. I resolved not to talk to Laura about it. Besides, she would not listen since she was head over heels for Jimmy. She would probably think I was trying to break up her relationship, and there we would have a round of tongues lashing out hurting words. I often wonder why it is that my daughter hated me that much. That I can't talk to her like a mother would and she listens. Not up to 2 weeks, while I was working out my ass at my office, I got a text from Laura which read, "It's high time Jimmy got his own car." This cracked me up a little, and gradually I let out a cruel laughter. My secretary was alarmed and she kept asking what was the matter. I laughed until I felt my ribs hurt, and then it was followed by a tear. Immediately I was given a handkerchief to wipe the tears already streaming down my cheeks. I thanked my secretary and asked her to leave, promising to be okay. She did. I just sat there, not saying a word. Choked by hate, anger, bitterness. I got home that day, to meet Laura already waiting at the door for me. I suspected Jimmy might be somewhere in the house listening to our conversation. She demanded an audience and refused my pleas for a later time due to my fatigue. I was forced to slump into the couch and listen to what she had to say. Never have I ever been asked to buy a car for a total stranger, whom I am not pleased with, who lives in my house, whose sake my own daughter was ready to rob me clean. I reminded her how much I had spent a week ago, all for the same Jimmy. For once I told her how much I worked hard to be where I was, and I would not let some riffraff from some hole burn bridges and reap where he did not sow. I made it clear that Jimmy was a gold digger and I would not spend a dime of my hard-earned money for his sake anymore, no matter what. This did not go down well with Laura. She refused to listen to all the warnings I gave her, but threatened to leave the house and never come back since I would not do her bidding. Laura swore she would leave and I would never see her again. In fact, she swore she would not attend my funeral since I did not have her happiness at heart. I went mute while she talked. There was Jimmy walking into the exchange. And before me, he pleaded with Laura not to leave the estate. That he would win my trust eventually. I just stood up and carried the weight of my sadness and fatigue into my bedroom. Good thing I had my last dinner with Jonathan and I wasn't famished. So I slept off. Later around 2 a.m., I heard a tire screeching outside of the building and I looked from my window. It was Laura and Jimmy driving into the compound from wherever they'd been, presumably party. I sighed deeply and got back into bed. A week later, I was going through a report from my secretary when Jimmy stormed into my office. I was displeased at the behavior and I ordered him out, but instead, he sat down smiling and looking all cheerful. I wondered what he was up to. He spoke in an unusually calm and respectful manner which I never expected. In a flash, he drifted into a more condescending and boisterous tone, appraising his ability to unravel mystery and open up secrets hidden in the midst. I was lost as to what he meant. He made some analogy about a married man screwing a woman supposedly in an intimate relationship with another which resulted in some loss. Immediately I cast my mind back to 3 days ago when Ethan, director of production at the company's anniversary celebration, had gotten himself drunk and lost his way into my hotel room. We got talking. I was a little tipsy, and we both lost control and we had a fling. And that was all there was to it. The next morning I told him that what happened was a mistake and should never be referred to in future conversations, and he said he was going to say the same thing. And that was it. Beside, he was married with 2 kids and I know him to be a loyal husband and father. I was displeased with myself, but one cannot stay mad at oneself forever unless you are a masochist. Even when I told my therapist, she said it was just a fling. Neither of us had envisaged it. However, it's been awkward with Ethan afterward. I noticed the way he looked at me at the board meeting, though I didn't quite make anything out of it, enough to make me uncomfortable. I wondered if this incident was what Jimmy was referring to in his dumb analogy. I managed to get in control of my emotions as I asked what he was talking about. He let out a thundering laughter like the fiery male fairy tale character with magical power over fire and furnace Vulcan. He began to rattle as to how he had seen Ethan getting into my room and how he had listened to everything that transpired that night. I found myself asking him how he had stayed to listen to all that noise, and what he did afterward, which he claimed was none of my business. I retorted, this was none of his business either. He said it was his business since he knows the work ethics of our company. He knew the marital status of Ethan as well, knew my relationship status with Jonathan, and might well let his mouth run like a tap. As I probably seemed disturbed and fearful as I wriggled on the chair where I sat. He made a tut sound and went ahead to tell me he wouldn't tell anyone about it. He assured me it was just between us and that he wouldn't let it out. I didn't quite trust him as I asked what was in it for him. He smiled and said nothing, that he just came for a chat with his soon-to-be mother-in-law. With that, he left my office. I felt my heart skip. The minute this gets out, I will be done, I thought worriedly. A night fling was going to cost me a lot. I began to think about what to do. Nothing was making sense. I felt my temperature burning up, my heart skipping bits for minutes before skipping again. All around me was twirling round and round. I felt hot in a fully air-conditioned office. The whole day went badly. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't eat even while I was hungry. I felt a lump in my stomach and all I had was water. Gulping down cups of water. During dinner, I was shocked to find out that Jimmy had prepared dinner. I was wondering what he was up to. I couldn't speak much at the dining. Jimmy went on and on talking and laughing loudly that Laura had to ask if he had won the lottery or something. He simply said he just had a great day and that he chose to be happy. I knew it was all a lie. He was happy because he felt he had trapped me in the web he designed for me. Little did he know what was coming. The next morning, when I looked out my window and saw Laura driving out, I exhaled deeply, hoping she left with Jimmy. I didn't want the ill luck of having to storm into him at the sitting or wherever. I got ready for work, walked downstairs into the living room, and was glad when I saw just the housekeeper. I went to the dining to have my breakfast. Halfway into sipping my cup of tea, was the devil smiling at me. I froze and melted in a flash. He just smiled and spat out a sarcastic good morning, and said something about how pleasant it is for his mother-in-law to be the first to grace his sight on a beautiful morning. I choked on the tea. He passed me a napkin. I couldn't utter a word. My mind traveled back to the previous day and I cursed. He went ahead to tell me how necessary it was to give him some money to sort out some bills. I realized that this was what all of these were about. A blackmail. I mustered courage, regained my strength, controlled my breath, and I told him I wouldn't give him a dime. He seemed pissed but collected. I told him I didn't have money to throw since I worked for it, and he should do the same for himself. He sighed, gnashed his teeth, and made a tut sound. According to him, it was a matter of necessity that I couldn't avoid or I'll be faced with a shameful consequence. Then he said it was okay. He reached for his cell phone in his pants pocket. I peered from my side view as he made some touching on the screen, and immediately I got a message buzz on my phone. Dropped the napkin and grabbed my phone to see what it was. I was dumbfounded by what I saw. I said no word. Immediately I grabbed my purse and left for the office. I sat at my table thinking about what to do. I was at a loss. How could one be so heartless? Jimmy was bent on ruining my life. I was so afraid that I had to send him the money he demanded for. It was quite a whooping sum, but I painfully gave it to him thinking that that was the end. I thought he would stop after that. The thing about blackmailers is that they never stop, one for more and so it continues. The next day, he was demanding more money. This went on for a while and I knew I was getting to my breaking point. Laura barely listens to whatever it is I try to tell her. She never listened to every single thing I had to tell her. I got fed up with all of it. So I started devising a means to free myself from the shackles of extortion. A thought flashed through my mind and I set to work. I summoned Ethan to my office. Told him about the new development, and he was more disturbed than I expected. I showed him the pictures Jimmy had sent me that morning and he was cursing breathlessly. He didn't handle it as well as I'd envisaged. Being a man, I'd thought he'd be calm to think about the step to be taken. Instead, he seemed as though his heart was about to jump out of his body. So I told him, he'd have to move to the company's startup in Florida. Since I was the board chairperson, I didn't have to consult with board members for this decision and he was willing to move, owning to the fact that his wife also got a job at the Central Hospital Florida, so he was more than willing to move. It all fell into place as everything was planned out. He was leaving in 5 days. Later I called Jimmy to strike a deal, at least come to an agreement as to what it is he wanted exactly. When he came into my office, he was looking so serious that I wondered what he was up to. However, I didn't ask. Whatever it was, not my business. I'd asked him what exactly he would exchange for the pictures you were using to blackmail me, and without giving it a thought, even for a second, he demanded for my estate. This kept me baffled. I thought he was joking. I smiled uncomfortably and repeated the question, thinking perhaps I wasn't clear earlier. He repeated the same thing. He would have my estate in exchange for the pictures. And he wasn't joking with words. I saw a beast in the way he smirked. Nothing about him was pleasant. I have always known he was a gold digger, a greedy person who would do anything to get what he wanted. I told him outrightly that from the first day he set his godforsaken feet into my home, there was something unsettling around him. I told him how much of a greedy he was and how soon karma would catch up with him, tear him apart bit by bit, and he'll feel the pain he inflicted on others. I swore and cursed him. All he said in response was that I should leave with my daughter after giving him the estate and that he was never interested in her. This broke my heart. I was going to forgive his insults, disrespect, blackmail, and gold digging, but the fact that he just used my daughter broke me. I felt moist around my eyes and all became silent. Even when he walked out of my office, I didn't notice for what seemed like an hour. I was in a state of mental blackout, but I felt tears streaming down my cheeks, which tasted salty. I had no idea about the next step to take, but I didn't know there was progress. Unfortunately for Jimmy, I had recorded the entire conversation. It partly went just as I envisaged, although I had forgotten to stop recording immediately after the conversation. But it was safely saved and I was good to get on with the next step, even though I was more hurt knowing that he only used my daughter to make money. I talked to Laura about it later that day. I was surprised when she responded to my call immediately. Listening to the record, she looked disappointed and sad. She further told me how she had found some dishonest schemes stored up in his phone. It appears that he goes about robbing people of their lifetime investment and money. We weren't the only ones he was blackmailing. He had done it to a lot of other people. He was a scam. He lived by extorting people. Laura suggested we call the police on him. For the first time, we were unanimously going to make a decision. I was glad that she was getting back to her senses and I hoped it remained so. Immediately we heard him pull up into the garage. I asked Laura to pretend as if everything was cool. We agreed to steal his phone. She went into their bedroom and acted normal so Jimmy wouldn't get suspicious. I stayed in my room thinking about what next to do. I heard them leave after a while and I walked stealthily into their room. Laura had told me where exactly to find it. I took it. Immediately I left for the police station. At the station, I told them everything I knew and was asked to write a statement, which I did, and was called back by an officer to write my name, in a stipulated space-tagged complainant. Immediately I got done with it. Markson. The officer seemed fascinated by the name but didn't have the time to ask more about it. They were ready for an arrest. We got back home only to find Jimmy about to hit Laura with a vase for not telling him where his phone was. I screamed as the officers hurriedly handcuffed him. I helped my daughter up and gave her a glass of water. He threatened again to reveal my secret affairs with Ethan, which made me laugh. I told him he had nothing on me anymore. Jonathan had left the company weeks ago. I cursed his ignorance all these while. He had been in the company and hadn't seen Jonathan. It didn't cross his mind to find out why. As for Ethan, he was far away in Florida. It was obvious to him that he had been caught in the same web he designed for me. That night, I was fixing up my bedroom when Laura walked in, looking frightened. We both made to talk at the same time but paused waiting for who goes first. A mother knows when her child is back. I was bustling with emotions when she said she was sorry. For once I saw the sincerity and repentance in her voice. She went on and talked about Malibu. She went there with her classmates from high school and that was where she met Jimmy. She was sorry for threatening not to attend my funeral. She was sorry for disrespecting me. She was sorry being obstinate. She was sorry for putting me through a lot of pressure. She was specifically naming each and every hardship she put me through. I maintained an unusual calmness. I felt tears streaming down my cheeks. I cried. We both cried. For a while, we cried and clung to each other. And that marked the beginning of our relationship. The next morning we woke up and I could swear there was a flood of fresh air sweeping into my room and it stayed. It was dawn. And I knew that while the sun rose, it would herald a strong mother and daughter relationship that would never be broken by anything. It was a long hard year and I was grateful it was finally over. Laura was back to her senses and I couldn't be more grateful and happy. Laura was set on making inquiries about college. She was finally ready to go to college and I couldn't be more happy. She decided she would go to Princeton and study business management. I was more than elated when she told me about it. When I got into a heart-to-heart conversation with her, I understood it was Jimmy who had deceived her into thinking that she doesn't need college. I was glad she finally came to her senses. These past few days have been the happiest days of my life. If gratefulness was a person, that would be me. I forgave Laura because she was my daughter and was all that I had. We've been happy ever since. At the height of the reconciliation, I got a call from Jonathan, checking up on us. We ended the call with an air of something unfinished.